heart of ancient Israel, in the small town of Bethlehem, lived a shepherd boy named David. Unknown to many, this young shepherd was chosen by God for a destiny that would alter the course of history. This is the story of David, from the time he was anointed by the prophet Samuel to the time he was crowned king over Israel. In the ancient hills of Bethlehem, the sun rose over the rolling pastures, casting a golden glow on the fields of grazing sheep. The village was a modest one, its people humble and hard-working, but on this particular day, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Little did they know that this day would mark the rise of a shepherd boy to the throne of Israel. Samuel, the prophet of the Lord, had been sent by God to anoint the next king of Israel. King Saul had fallen out of favor with God, and a new king was to be chosen from the sons of Jesse, a man of humble means. As they stood before Samuel, the prophet's eyes fell upon Eliab, the eldest. Eliab was tall and strong, his presence commanding. Samuel thought to himself, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord spoke to Samuel's heart, saying, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance. But the Lord looks at the heart. Samuel nodded, understanding that God's ways were higher than his own. He moved on to the next son, Abinadab, and then to Shammah, but each time the Lord whispered the same rejection. One by one, Jesse presented 7 of his sons, but the Lord had chosen none of them. Confusion flickered in Samuel's eyes as he turned to Jesse. "Are these all the sons you have?" he asked. Jesse hesitated, scratching his head. "There is still the youngest," he admitted. "David. He is tending the sheep." Samuel's heart quickened. "Send for him, we will not sit down until he arrives." Jesse dispatched a servant to fetch David. As the young shepherd boy arrived, a light seemed to shine from him. As David approached, the Lord spoke to Samuel, saying, "Rise and anoint him, this is the one." Samuel's heart leapt with joy and reverence. He took the horn of oil and, in front of David's astonished brothers, poured it over the young shepherd's head. The oil flowed down, glistening in the sunlight, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day forward. David's life changed forever. He returned to his sheep, but now he carried within him the knowledge of his divine calling. The days that followed were filled with a mix of wonder and routine. He continued to tend his flock, playing his harp and singing praises to God under the vast open sky. Yet he also felt a new strength and courage growing within him, a sense of purpose that he had never known before. Meanwhile, in the royal court, King Saul's tormented spirit grew increasingly troubled. His disobedience had driven away the peace of God, and he was plagued by dark moods and restlessness. His advisers suggested music as a remedy. "Find someone who plays well, and bring him to me." Saul commanded. "I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the harp," said one of the servants. "He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man. And the Lord is with him." Saul, intrigued by the description, sent messengers to Jesse with a request. "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." Jesse complied, and David found himself summoned to the palace. He brought with him his harp, and as he played for Saul, the soothing strains of music eased the king's troubled mind. Saul grew fond of David and made him one of his armor-bearers. Whenever the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, David would play his harp, and the king would find relief. David's life at court was a stark contrast to the simplicity of the shepherd's life. He moved among the nobility, observed the workings of the royal household, and learned the ways of leadership. Yet he never forgot his humble beginnings or the sacred anointing that had set him apart. It wasn't long before David's bravery and faith were put to the test in a most unexpected way. The Philistines, Israel's long-standing enemies, gathered their forces for war. They camped on one hill, while the Israelites camped on another, with a valley between them. Among the Philistine ranks was a giant named Goliath, a warrior of immense stature and strength. Every day, for 40 days, Goliath stepped forward and taunted the Israelites, challenging them to send a champion to fight him. Saul and his men were dismayed and terrified. No one dared to face the giant. One day, Jesse sent David to the battlefield to bring food to his brothers and check on their well-being. When David arrived, he heard Goliath's defiant challenge and saw the fear in the eyes of the Israelite soldiers. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David asked, his voice filled with righteous indignation. His brothers scolded him, thinking him proud and insolent. But David was undeterred. He was brought before Saul, who looked at the young shepherd with skepticism. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him," David declared. Saul was astonished. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." David spoke with conviction. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul saw the unwavering faith in David's eyes and consented. "Go, and the Lord be with you." Saul offered David his own armor, but it was too cumbersome for the young shepherd. Instead, David chose his simple sling and selected 5 smooth stones from a stream. With his shepherd's staff in hand, he approached Goliath. The giant sneered at the sight of David. "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" he roared. "Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David, undaunted, replied, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As Goliath moved closer to attack, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, he took out a stone, placed it in his sling, and hurled it at the giant. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead, sinking into his flesh. The giant stumbled and fell face down on the ground. David triumphed over Goliath with a sling and a stone. He ran to the fallen giant, took Goliath's sword, and cut off his head. The Philistines, seeing their champion dead, turned and ran. The Israelites pursued them, securing a great victory. News of David's victory spread like wildfire throughout Israel. The young shepherd who had been anointed in secret was now a hero, celebrated by the people. Saul, however, grew increasingly jealous and fearful of David's rising popularity. He saw in David a threat to his throne, not knowing that the shepherd boy had already been chosen by God to be the future king. David's journey was far from over. He would face many trials and tribulations, his faith tested time and again. He would know both the depths of despair and the heights of triumph. Yet, through it all, he remained steadfast, a man after God's own heart. However, as David's fame grew, Saul became increasingly jealous and fearful of him. The women of Israel sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands," which further fueled Saul's envy. Saul's jealousy eventually turned into rage, and he made several attempts on David's life. Saul even tried to pin David to the wall with a spear, but David managed to escape. Realizing his life was in danger, David fled from Saul's court. He became a fugitive, constantly on the run from Saul's forces. Despite the dangers, David refused to harm Saul, believing it was wrong to kill the Lord's anointed king. On 2 occasions, David had the opportunity to kill Saul but chose not to, showing his loyalty and respect for Saul's position as king. During this time, David gathered a band of loyal followers and continued to fight against the enemies of Israel, including the Philistines. He lived in various locations, including the wilderness, caves, and even among the Philistines for a time, pretending to be on their side to escape Saul's wrath. Saul's mental state continued to deteriorate as his fear and paranoia grew. He became increasingly desperate to capture David but was never able to do so. Eventually, Saul's reign came to a tragic end when he was defeated by the Philistines in the Battle of Mount Gilboa. Saul was gravely wounded in battle, and, rather than being captured by the Philistines, he fell on his own sword and died. His sons, including Jonathan, were also killed in the battle. After Saul's death, David mourned for him and Jonathan, composing a lament for the fallen king and his friend. With Saul gone, David was anointed king over the tribe of Judah, while Ishbosheth, one of Saul's surviving sons, was made king over the northern tribes of Israel. a civil war ensued between the forces loyal to David and those loyal to Ishbosheth. David's forces eventually prevailed, and Ishbosheth was assassinated by his own men. With the death of Ishbosheth, the tribes of Israel came to David and anointed him as king over all Israel. David moved his capital to Jerusalem, which he captured from the Jebusites, and thus began his reign as the king of a united Israel, marking the start of a new chapter in the history of the Israelites. David's life was a remarkable journey from shepherd to king, filled with moments of courage, faith, failure, and redemption. And his story continues to inspire and teach valuable lessons about trusting God, the power of repentance, and the importance of faithfulness and obedience. David's victory over Goliath remains one of the most powerful narratives of triumph against overwhelming odds. It reminds us that no matter the giants we face, whether they are external challenges or internal struggles, we can overcome them with faith, courage, and reliance on God.